today we're going to continue with Lesson 6 in Unit 6, distinguishing between two types of situations. We will be thinking about equations with and without parentheses and the kinds of situations they describe. These are today's goals. Understand the similarities and differences between the two main types of equations we are studying in this unit. When I have a situation or a tape diagram, I can represent it with an equation. Okay, you already should have completed the which one doesn't belong for a warm-up on the Google Slides assignment. If you haven't done that, go back and do that assignment first and then come back to the video. Okay, for the which one doesn't belong, I'm just going to point out some of the reasons that you might have said for some of these. Right away for this one, I see the parentheses and I think this one might not fit in with the others because it has parentheses where the other equations don't. And then for this one, I noticed that there's a multiplication sign, whereas the other ones just have the coefficient next to the variable and there isn't actually a multiplication sign. And then in this equation, I noticed that the 3 is actually being multiplied by the x and not the 4 like the other equations. And in this last one, this one kind of stands out because the equal sign, the 9 is on the other side of the equal sign, so it's kind of flip-flopped or reversed. Before we get into the main part of today's lesson, I want to review what we talked about yesterday. We didn't do this exact problem, but we did draw some tape diagrams. So I want to review how to draw a tape diagram because we're going to build on that for the next activity. So number 1, and this is not on your paper, so if you want to take notes on this specific example, then you need to get a separate sheet of paper out and write this down. Each of 5 gift bags contains X pencils. Tyler adds 3 more pencils to each bag. Altogether, the gift bags contain 20 pencils. So as I said yesterday, we want to first identify what is our total. So I'm going to reread that and we'll underline what our total is. Okay, each of 5 gift bags contains X pencils. Tyler adds 3 more pencils to each bag. Altogether, the gift bags contain 20 pencils. So right here, 20 pencils, that is my total. So I'm going to put that right here, 20 pencils. Next, I need to figure out what is being divided. How am I dividing up my my rectangle? So I'm going to go back and reread the story and figure out how am I dividing up this rectangle. So each of 5 gift bags contains X pencils. Right here, each of 5. That each is telling me that we have groups of something. And so our gift bags are a group. So I need to divide up this rectangle into 5 parts. The next thing I see is that each part has X pencils. So I'm going to put an X in each of the 5 gift bags. But a little different than yesterday, I see my next sentence says, Tyler adds 3 more pencils to each bag. So now I need to go back and add 3 to each bag. So what this tape diagram is saying, we have 5 gift bags that each have an X amount of pencils plus an additional 3 more pencils for a total of 20 pencils in all 5 gift bags. And for the second part of yesterday was that we were going to have to match an equation with the tape diagram. So the equation that would match this tape diagram is we would have X plus 3, and we know we have equals 20, but it's 5 groups of X plus 3 So that's how you would make your equation. 5 groups of x plus 3 equals 20. Okay, so here is our second example of how to draw a tape diagram. Noah drew an equilateral triangle with side lengths of 5 inches. He wants to increase the length of each side by x inches, so the triangle is still equilateral and has a perimeter of 20 inches. All right, so as I said yesterday, the first thing that we want to do is figure out what is our total. So I'm going to reread the story and then find out what my total is. Okay, so Noah drew an equilateral triangle with side lengths of 5 inches. He wants to increase the length of each side by x inches, so the triangle is still equilateral and has a perimeter of 20 inches. So this right here is our total. Okay, so we're going to divide up our tape diagram by looking at the number of sides in a triangle. And a triangle has 3 sides, so we're going to divide up our tape diagram into 3 parts. In the story, each side length is 5 inches. So I'm going to add 5 to each space. But then Noah wants to add x inches to each side. So now I'm going to add x to each of those 5s. Okay, so this tape diagram shows that for a total of 20 inches of the perimeter, each of the one of the 3 sides is 5 inches plus an additional X amount of inches. And to write this as an equation, we have 3 groups of 5 plus X, and that equals 20 inches for the perimeter of the triangle. All right, so now we're going to get into today's activity, which is even more situations, diagrams, and equations. This is on the front side of the paper that you received today. Okay, story 1 on your paper says Lynn had 90 flyers to hang up around the school. She gave 12 flyers to each of 3 volunteers. Then she took the remaining flyers and divided them up equally between the 3 volunteers. Which diagram matches the story, A or B? So the answer is diagram B. Diagram B matches story 1 because the total is 90 flyers. So here we have 90 flyers. And then she gave 12 flyers to each of 3 volunteers. She took the remaining and divided them up equally among the 3 volunteers. So here she has 12 flyers. And then our Y, the unknown amount, is divided among 3 volunteers. So what part of the story does Y represent? Y represents the remaining flyers she gave to each volunteer. So when we write this as an equation, our equation is going to be 3 times y plus 12 equals 90 because we have 3 groups of y plus 12 and the total is 90. Okay, and then to solve for y, we are going to divide by 3 because we want to figure out how much does one group have. So we will be left with y plus 12 equals, and if I do 90 divided by 3, that will equal 30. So one volunteer has 30 flyers. And if I subtract 12 from that 30, it's going to give me how much the unknown value is. And 30 minus 12 is 18. So that means y equals 18. So just to review, we divided 90 by 3 because there are 3 volunteers. So we wanted to figure out how much does each volunteer have, which is where we got our 30. And so we have an unknown amount plus the 12 flyers equals 30 flyers. We subtract the 12 to figure out that an unknown amount, which we gave us our 18 flyers. Okay, story 2 is Lynn had 90 flyers to hang up around the school. After giving the same number of flyers to each of 3 volunteers, she had 12 left to hang up by herself. So obviously, if the first story is diagram B, that leaves diagram A for story 2. So this is an example of what we did yesterday, where we had an amount that was originally left or separated from the equal groups. So we have 3 equal groups, but then also an amount off to the side. So what part of the story does X represent? X represents the number of flyers that she gave to each volunteer. So here we have our 3 equal groups for the 3 volunteers, and she gave an unknown amount to each of those volunteers. So now we're going to write an equation that represents this story, and the equation is 3x plus 12 equals 90, because we have 3 groups of x's and we have that additional 12, which all add up to 90 flyers. And now we are going to find the value of x. So we know that there are 90 total flyers. So we need to figure out, we're going to subtract 12 from both sides so that we can figure out how much is just this group right here. How much of the 90 flyers is that group? And so if we do 90 minus 12, we get 78. So that means 78 of the 90 were divided up into 3 equal groups. So to find out what that missing number is, I'm going to divide 78 by 3, and I will get x equals 26. So each volunteer got 26 flyers. Okay, so if we want to think about how are these diagrams alike and how are they different, go ahead and take a minute to think about that, and then we'll talk about it. So if you look at these 2 diagrams, they both had a total of 90, and then they were both had 3 equal groups in them, but one of the equations had an additional unequal group, being this 12 over in this first diagram right here. So that actually had 4 groups, but 3 of them were equal. So looking at these 2 equations, one of the obvious differences to me is that this equation right here has the parentheses in it. And the parentheses make a big difference because when we have the distributive property, we are going to distribute the 3 to each one. So we are really saying 3 times y and 3 times 12, which is 36. So our equation actually becomes 3y plus 36 equals 90, where this we just have the 3x plus 12. So there is a big difference between the 2 equations. Okay, so at this point, you should do the cool down on the back of your paper. And then when you finish the cool down, go ahead and start the homework, which is in Schoology for lesson 6, unit 6.